Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. I'm Annette Young. The treatment of its indigenous population has been described as a stain on the soul of Australia, especially the tale of the stolen generation. This is where children of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander descent were forcibly removed from their families by government agencies and church missions and placed in white homes. My guest today is one of those tens of thousands of children, now a renowned opera singer, as well as a composer and playwright. Deborah Cheetham joins me in the studio. Thank you so much, Deborah, for coming in.
It's such a pleasure to be here.
What is your earliest memory of singing?
Well, the earliest memory I have actually is of me leaning up against my mother in church, and she's actually singing. She's singing a hymn, and I really have a very strong sense of her breathing in and out and the sound kind of enveloping me like an embrace. And I'm pretty sure I was only 2 years old, maybe 3 at the most. So music has really been, and singing in particular, has been in my conscious, my subconscious for a very long time.
And at what age did you decide that opera was indeed, where you wanted to be?
I can tell you the date. It was the 19th of February 1979. I had just turned 14 and I was seeing the very first opera. I was having my first operatic experience in the Sydney Opera House, and it was with the magnificent Dame Joan Sutherland, one of Australia's, well, one of the world's greatest singers. And it was one of those moments, Annette, I thought, how can this have existed my whole life and I didn't know about it? Here is opera. And from that moment on, from the age of 14, I realised that this was something I wanted to do. I had no idea how you went about that, but I was in love with opera from the first moment I experienced.
I want to talk to you now about the story behind your birth and the fact that you were taken from your mother, I think at about 3 weeks old, forcibly removed. Your mother was a member of the Orta tribe in the southern part of New South Wales, the state of New South Wales. She actually managed to track you down 18 months later and was turned away. When were you told the whole story in its entirety, or did you find out in bits and pieces along the way?
Bits and pieces, definitely. I had been told from a very early age that I was an adopted Aboriginal. My parents made no secret of that. I was the only Aboriginal child in the family, in my community as far as I knew. But they had been told that, not that I'd been taken from Monica, but that she had abandoned me. They had been told that I'd been abandoned in a cardboard box in a field, which is basically a rip-off of the Old Testament story, Moses and the bulrushes, so not even original, unfortunately. But this was the information I was given, and I lived with that for a very long time, and it was only into my 20s and my 30s I started to realise that actually I was a member of the stolen generations. And to be honest with you, I am still discovering pieces of the story, even now at the age of 52.
And you've reconnected with your family as a result?
I did reconnect with my Aboriginal family. It was a long and at times difficult process. I first met my Aboriginal mother at the age of 25. Now, at the age of 25, I still believed that this woman had abandoned me. I didn't find out the truth for another 3 years. I didn't realise that as a young woman in the 1960s, Monica had no rights at all as a young Aboriginal woman. And in fact, when I was born, it was another 3 years until I was actually counted as a human being in Australia. It was another 3 years until the referendum, which gave Aboriginal Australians the recognition of human being.
And this was 1967.
67 was the referendum. We've just celebrated 50 years.
Your adoptive mother, however, struggled with all of this, didn't she?
She did. My adopted parents were such loving people. They were so generous, and I can honestly say they gave me every opportunity they possibly could in life, except the except for the opportunity to discover who I am as an Aboriginal person. They were afraid of that. They had been educated to believe that, well, that they'd saved me from my Aboriginal self. You know, it's a ridiculous notion, but this is where Australia has been at for a very long time. Many Australians are still at that point. I think one of the great regrets in life for me is that my adopted mother held on to this fear that for me to embrace my Aboriginality was somehow a failure on her part. And she passed away feeling that. And if I could change anything at all, it would be to take away that fear that my adopted mother had. You know, she will forever be the woman who raised me, my mother. I just happen to have another mother who I was able to, over a period of time, I was able to develop a relationship with my Aboriginal mother. But these matters are complicated, and it becomes the focus of your life. And you kind of wonder, well, what would I have been doing if I hadn't had to channel so much of my life to this discovery? But
and it's gone
that's
on.
my path.
It's gone on to impact your career. I mean, you developed a successful career as an opera singer. You sung at the opening ceremonies of the 2000 Sydney Olympics. You've performed across the world, but in 2007 you created an opera called Pecan Summer, which is very much your family's history and the history of other Indigenous Australians.
That's true.
Why, at that particular moment in time, did you decide to do it?
Well, I'd been performing as a classical singer for something like 20 years by 2007, and I'd never shared the stage with another Indigenous opera singer. And I just felt that that's no kind of legacy, to be the only one of something. I don't see the point of that. And also I knew what opera had given me, the relationship I'd had with opera all those years, the joy and the power of this medium of performance. I wanted to share that. And I felt that it was time to actually create a pathway for other Indigenous singers into the world of classical vocal music. I felt that really there was no reason why there couldn't be other Indigenous opera singers. It was just a lack of opportunity. For Aboriginal Australia, a song, it's not merely a song, it's a map to your identity. And our knowledge is sung in those more than 1,000 generations.
And they're called songlines.
And they are called songlines. It's not only a map to your identity, it's literally a map to the geography of where you come from. It has that significance. And these songlines can be sung over a period of days. They can be almost like a ring cycle, if you like. So I felt that there was enough common ground. I knew there were great voices out there, but I also knew that there was a lack of opportunity for Indigenous singers. I mean, here's an interesting fact. It was only in 1975 that the law was changed, which stated that the principal of a local school could deny access to education for Aboriginal children. 1975. Now, I started school 4 years earlier than that, so the principal of the school I went to could have said, no, we won't accept this child because she's Aboriginal. It wasn't the case for me, but it was the case for many other children. So when we talk about a lack of opportunity, this is not a lack of will on the part of Aboriginal people. It literally is an exclusion from the kind of rights that other Australians take for granted.
You refused to perform the national anthem, Advance Australia Fair, at the 2015 rugby final in Sydney, I think it was.
AFL grand final.
Sorry, AFL. Yeah. Yes, I have to make the distinction. I do apologise. Australia clearly is still struggling with the way that it treated its Indigenous communities, the struggles that those Indigenous people have had. Given that there's now a growing campaign against Australia Day, which of course is the day that marks the beginning of white settlement in the country, do you think or do you sense there's a change in the air, particularly among young people? Or is it the case that things haven't really advanced?
I think there is definitely a change in the air. Yes, amongst young people and older people as well. And I think that that has come about through many, many years of effort. The story we tell in Pecan Summer is of the first mass strike of Aboriginal people, the Yorta Yorta people, the 67 referendum, the 2008 apology to the stolen generations, all of these significant milestones. It's very slow progress, I have to say, but I feel that there is a change coming and that Australia is ready to embrace a kind of maturity that it has lacked up until this point in time. You know, the reason that I decided not to sing the anthem at that grand final, and let's face it, at a football grand final, it's pretty much the biggest audience you'll get all year. But I decided that the first two lines of the anthem just doesn't cut it anymore. Australians all let us rejoice, yes, for we are young and free. We're not young. We're not young by any stretch of the imagination. Even if you only go from colonisation to 130 years, it's not young. If you even go just from federation, 100 years, not young. But Australia was founded on songlines that had been in the country for more than 70,000 years. The sweat and the tears and the lives of Aboriginal people lived out in those early days of colonisation, that contributed to what Australia is today. So we're not young. And we also are not free. We enjoy many freedoms, but for instance, my partner Tony and I are not free to marry in Australia. We do not have marriage equality. So there are some more milestones that I hope to see in my lifetime. And even though my mother, Monica, didn't live to see the kind of Australia that I can envisage, I know that her spirit lives in me, and I'll take hold of any opportunity I can to help Australia grow up.
Deborah Cheetham, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much. And that's it for the France 24 interview. Do stay with us because there'll be more news and headlines coming up very shortly.